Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Boldest Round. I'm Hady Raphael, and tonight on the show, CF Montreal loses second straight in DC. We will present the SheBelieves Cup roster and, of course, Canada Soccer entire financial situation that's been exposed by General Secretary Kevin Blue. That and a lot more on episode 173 of The Boldest Round. And I'm joined by my good friends, Eve Powell and Elias Grigoriadis. Hey, peeps, how are you today?
I'm hanging in there. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm in theme with Easter because I said peeps. Yeah, whatever. Happy Easter to both of you. I know, Elias, it's far. It's not yet your Easter,
Can't wait.
Still happy Easter.
Yes.
Eve, also happy Easter.
Thank you. Also happy Easter to Tate.
I'm still happy because it's a long weekend. So hey, you know what? I'm not mad.
Yeah, exactly. That's the highlight for me.
Exactly, it is. It is a highlight, I think, for everyone. So hope you guys, had time with friends or family or whoever. So that's, I think, very important during those times. And of course, for everybody that celebrates Easter here and are listening to us, so happy Easter to you also. So let's start with that episode. We have a lot to talk about, as usual, right? So let's start to talk about CF Montreal. Fifth game on the road for Laurent Courtois' team. It's very important to mention that because that's something that we have a tendency to forget. And they were playing in DC against DC United. Of course, it was going to be a very different challenge, and we'll talk about that a bit later when we'll talk about the opposition. And at that time, Laurent Courtois chose continuity in a certain way with the starting 11. So we had Jonathan Sirois in goal, the three center backs with Gabriel Corbo on the right, Joel Waterman in the middle, and Alvarez on the left. As wing backs, we had Rouen on the right, we had Lassiter on the left, Piet and Chouanière in the middle, Yankov as a left offensive midfielder, Matias Kokaro as a right offensive midfielder, and Joseph Martinez as the lone striker. Of course, those roles were changed during the game, but most of the time, this is the setup that we've seen. Guys, when you saw that starting 11, I'm pretty sure somewhere you were happy to see a Joseph Martinez, starting a game for the first time for Montreal, right, Eve?
Yeah, definitely. Knowing that on the other hand, DC United had Christian Benteke leading their line. Offensive prowess, it was going to be a struggle for sure to compete with whatever DC was going to be able to offer. But obviously, seeing one of the TAM player signings fit enough to start a match and to play that many minutes was very encouraging, as he really didn't play at all in the preseason. Of course, he was a little bit of a late signing. So yeah, definitely a bit of a wait.
Yeah, for sure. And we've seen a lot, Elias, of that combination between Dominic Yankov and Joseph Martinez. So I think that everybody was really waiting to see that again on a longer span. So during that game, seeing that both of them started the game, is that something that you were really focusing on yourself, Elias, too?
Yeah, I was kind of hoping to see what they could, develop with not just being 15-minute cameo, but what they can do with the entire process of a game, growing into a match and stuff like that. I was excited to see all three, really, because these really are the three big signings of the offseason. And this is the first time we've seen them start a game together. So I was very excited to see that, especially against a team that, historically gives Montreal such a hard time. So
Yeah, no, for sure. And before we talk about the offense, because the story of the game, let's talk about the story of the game. just before the game, I tweeted something saying I think it was going to be the toughest opponent that CF Montreal was going to have since the beginning of the season because of the way DC United plays. They play with very high intensity, high pressing, like very high pressing, with a lot of energy. They press with 4 or 5 players on the defenders, and we've seen that like from the beginning of the game until the end. Guys, when you saw that high press, that was very, very effective against CF Montreal. Did you think that we were completely going to be dominated, Elias? Let's start with you today.
I don't think dominated because there were ways to make DC hurt, and we saw it not right away, but even 15 minutes into the game, we kind of saw ways that Montreal could hurt DC. The problem is, once again, do they have the energy to match such a high press? And you could tell that again, Metzer Schwanier, and we'll talk about the midfield after. Metzer Schwanier and Saint-Piet were kind of overrun in the middle of the park. And Dominic Yankov was kind of, being a true blue 10 and maybe not dropping as deep. But, and that was the first thing I thought of when I saw the lineup is, again, it's that double pivot. And, it's games like this where you wonder, again, this is Laurent Courtois as a young coach kind of sticking to his guns. And maybe this loss will kind of serve as a learning experience, and we'll see a different formation or a different group in the future.
That's very interesting because it's tough not to talk about the tactical setup of CF Montreal when talking about the high press of DC United. But still, what we saw also, Eve, we saw that sometimes that central defense of Waterman, Corbo, and Alvarez had a lot of trouble finding their teammates when they were pressed that high. So when you see that, can you blame those 3 defenders, or do you need to blame the whole tactical setup?
I'm gonna go for the latter. I think it felt like DC's plan was to just absolutely suffocate Montreal's defenders when they attempted to build out of the back and really limit their options. And unfortunately, like if the options just aren't there, then it's either on the midfield players to kind of try and scoot around and liberate themselves a little bit, or they're just so limited. And unfortunately, they were limited in passing to players who were not having their best days individually.
Exactly.
I'm going to say tactically, and then also their options that made themselves available weren't having a good day to be the only option. So it was kind of twofold.
Okay. So when you say, the options weren't having a good day, who are you talking about exactly?
I'm talking about the players on the flanks.
On the flanks. So Juan and Lassiter.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about that? What did you think about their performance?
Well, obviously, we're going to talk about, I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about Ruan's performance in the second half. Not so much his defensive performance, but his offensive performance. For Ruan, I felt like he looked tired. Like, I felt like his runs weren't as incisive as they had been. You could see, especially as the match wore on, like he was having to catch his breath at times. And on the left-hand side, Aaron Herrera, we know what a great defender he is. And for me, he kind of just ate poor Ariel Lassiter alive, truly. Ariel Lassiter was not very incisive offensively at all. Like, he wasn't terribly impactful. He seemed to be rather limited in what he was trying to bring. I don't know if that was instructions that were given or not. And then defensively, I think all of DC's most dangerous chances came from his side of the field, which is not the greatest moment for a player to have, obviously. So I don't know if it's fatigue from being on the road. Like I said, I felt like Ruan did look really tired. His decision making as well, in a couple of instances, was off. He had a situation where I think he 100% should have taken a shot deep in the second half. And unfortunately, he tried to pass to Martinez, who had already been covered by a defender at that point, and it came to nothing, even though he had a clear sight of goal. I don't know, like maybe if you're feeling like 100% fit, you're willing to take that risk. Yeah, I think that about sums it up.
That's very interesting. I think that one, in my opinion, and I can't wait to hear from you, Elias, regarding Ruan. I think that Ruan was very generous in his efforts as usual. Did a lot of up and downs, like going down the line, and was very generous in the effort. But again, his final decision, as you said, Eve, was a bit weird, was a bit off most of the time during the game. The thing is, I feel that if Juan was better at taking that final decision, he wouldn't be in MLS. He would be in Europe in one of the best teams, because he does so much on the pitch, running around, and he's very pacey. He's able to create a lot of stuff. So if he was able to be decisive, then we would have seen a player that wouldn't be in Montreal, in my honest opinion. Do you agree with that, Elias? Do you think that Juan brings a lot, and that sometimes we expect a bit more from him when it's already enough what he brings? That's my opinion.
Well, at the very least, Montreal would not have gotten him and almost $500,000 GAM for Aaron Herrera. He would be one of the best fullbacks in the league
MLS
if he was in MLS. So yeah, I mean, look, there were a couple moments where you're kind of like pulling your hair out, and there were more moments last night than there were in other games throughout the season. But this has been a common thing. It's just that his willingness to get forward, his pace, and also his defensive contribution kind of outweighed the odd moment of poor decision making. And so this was the first game where really it came to a head, because of the fact that Montreal's chances and final third possession did come at a premium. So when he did kind of boof it or make the wrong decision, or not take the shot when he had to, like you said, it became that much more glaring. If it was against like Chicago, when they had when he had half a dozen touches, and it happened twice, and no one's gonna think about it because he had 4 other moments that are really solid. But last night it really did show, and it almost affected the psychology of the group, because it wasn't just happening on his side, right? Ariel Lassiter, it's more of a credit to how good he's been this year, but this was his worst game of the season.
Yeah,
I think his lack of defensive experience was exposed. But on Ruan's side, defensively, I think him and Gabriela Corbo did really well on that right hand side. It's just that going forward, it's that maybe it's the familiarity that still has to develop. Maybe it's stuff like that, and he has to settle himself with Laurent Courtois' system. But you could really tell that this was the first game where it's like, oh, that's what growing pains are supposed to be like.
Yeah, and talking about that, you talked about Ariel Lassiter, and that's another thing. I was looking for the stat, but I think more than 65% of DC United's attacks were on Ariel Lassiter side, which is kind of interesting. But I wanted to hear your opinion. Do you think that DC United pinpointed Ariel Lassiter as being the weakest link in that defense, or do you think that it was mostly them, putting a lot more focus on what Aaron Herrera can bring at that point? So, what would be your assumption, Eve?
I don't know necessarily if they had planned that before the match, but I think it became pretty clear pretty quick that was where they were going to get the most joy. So I don't want to necessarily say it was a plan from the outset. Obviously, they are intimately familiar with what Ruan can bring, having had him as a player last season. So, maybe they realized, that complementary player who they had on their left-hand side, just maybe wasn't going to be quite as much of a threat against Ruan as they know him well. But I think it would have been reasonable to assume that Aaron Herrera could take Ariel Lassiter.
Interesting. I'll just rephrase my question. Sorry, it wasn't very clear. But do you think that going forward for other opponents,
Yeah.
it would be right for them to really pinpoint that left flank of the defense of CF Montreal with Lassiter and Alvarez? Do you think that's the weakest link, in CF Montreal defense? Sorry, I didn't phrase it
Okay, no,
very
sorry.
well.
Yeah, no, I totally, yeah. I do think right now Gabriele Corbo is definitely stronger. I think Ariel Lassiter can have much better days. If you had to, I think, compare them objectively side by side, then yes, it would say our left flank is weaker than our right flank. If a team is more strong going up the middle, I'm sure they're going to do that.
No, for sure. But usually, you try to find the weakness in the defense, right? And try to exploit it as much as possible.
Yeah.
Elias, I've seen so many tweets during the whole game talking about Joel Waterman and saying that he had a very bad game. And I felt very weird because I didn't think he had a bad game. Yes, he made a few errors, but quite a few times he was the one there in the box, making sure that that final pass doesn't go through, making sure that that header, that winning some headers in the box. Yes, he wasn't as crisp as he was in the first 3 games, but I didn't think he had a bad game. Am I blind, or do you agree with me?
It definitely wasn't his best game, but it was far
sure.
from bad outright, right? Anybody that has to match up with somebody like Benteke is going to have a difficult evening, especially when that's not Joel Waterman's bread and butter, right? He's not playing in the air is not where he excels at. So the fact that, yes, Christian Benteke did have some chances, but the fact that he kept them off the score sheet, well, him and Gabriele Corbo combined, I think, put in one hell of a shift on that front. There were other things that I think they could have managed a bit better, especially having, Samir Pieta and Metroshroniak in front of him to kind of maybe, again, be that general that is needed. Which he will grow into that, but you could tell that this is one of those games where it highlights the fact that he's not there yet.
Sure.
But I think he had, all in all, it could have been much worse. He held his own, and it kind of illustrated the fact that yes, he is also a very versatile defender. He could defend a number of different kinds of attackers. Christian Benteke was a really bad matchup for him. It's almost polar opposites in terms of style of defender versus style of attacker. So the fact that Christian Benteke didn't find the back of the net, again, thank you to Jonathan Sirois for some of them, but Joel Waterman and Gabriele Corbo played a large part in that, and at least limiting how much joy he had in the penalty area.
No, I agree, and let's talk about Jonathan Sirois with you, Yves. We remember last time before we left on the international break that the end of the game where it's Jonathan Sirois, conceding that goal from Kellen Acosta, and we talked. You weren't here, unfortunately, but we talked about how difficult it would be for him mentally to really concede that final goal, because it's tough on a goalkeeper.
Yeah.
And even if there was the wind and everything, it's still something that could have been avoided in a certain way, right? So how do you think he fared against the DC United after such a difficult moment in the last game?
I think definitely he had a somewhat better showing. I'm sure the fact that he kind of got a change of scenery in the international window, he got to go to the Canada camp, probably helped. There probably wasn't as much lingering on that outcome and the era in the match against Chicago. He definitely wasn't perfect. Gabriele Corbo did absolutely save his butt in the first half by clearing a ball off the line. It wasn't his strongest showing of the season for sure. However, definitely noticed a lot. I think he tried to keep it a lot more simple, perhaps than in the previous match, or even in the previous 2 matches. And it was kind of just very back to basics for him, as far as catch the balls you can catch, don't stray too far outside of your safe zone. placement on set pieces. I thought was like he wasn't like trying to take too many risks or like engage with opposition players or anything like that. So I kind of felt like it was almost like a reset for him.
Interesting. I thought that he took more risks, in my opinion, because because we saw him participate a lot more in the build-up at one point. Playing, giving that extra help in the central defense sometimes, and going outside of his area, which happened quite a few times, and we've seen it during the preseason, but we've never seen it in the in an official game, and we saw it yesterday.
See, I thought like where Montreal kind of found themselves back so far due to the high press, maybe that was just like how I interpreted it, was because like the defense was kind of stuck so close back for a large part of the game that he had to, except for, the odd instance where they had set pieces, and I'm sure we'll talk about straying, other players straying outside of their safest zones as well later on.
No, exactly. Elias, do you think he did well? Do you think he did well, playing that role, getting, helping his defense and the distribution of the ball? Of course, we've always said that it was his Achilles heel, distributing the ball, trying to find, other teammates, playing long, playing short, and choosing between playing long and playing short. How do you think he did yesterday by on that front?
I think he did all right. There wasn't anything glaring. At the same time, I think the fact that they're starting to surround him with really good line breaking passing defenders kind of takes that load off him, because now all he needs is a 10-15 foot pass, and then they can break the line. Again, you have a goalkeeper that can do that. You skip a step and it makes life that much easier. But if that's the only Achilles heel, and you have someone like Gabriel Corbo, someone like Joel Waterman, and even someone like who's starting to grow into it, like Fernando Alvarez, who can kind of ping a pass 20-30 yards and break a line or even skip a step, then that's not that bad of an Achilles heel to have. Again, if you do want to challenge Maxime Crépeau for the number one job in the national team, if you do want to get to the next step of your career, if Europe really is an ambition, you need to become not just better, but you have to become proficient with the ball at your feet. Because even if you go to a team that defends a whole lot and that plays, that parks the bus, you still have to be able to play out of the back in some capacity.
Of course.
And,
that's a modern goalkeeper.
Exactly. 10-15 foot passes, that is entry level stuff, right? That is the bare minimum. So he has to still continuously improve. There were some where he kind of stretched his range a little bit that were all right, and then I found, okay, fine. So you could tell he's working on it. Yeah. But it's still very much a work in progress. And I think that, he's nowhere near the level I think he wants to be.
Yeah.
But you can tell that is definitely his focus this year, is getting better at that.
He talked about it during the presser, and he said that it was a bit unusual for him, and it's not something that he done in the past, but he was very happy to do so. And he said it wasn't perfect, but you know what? I think I'm already improving, and I think I'm going to continue on improving throughout the season until the end of the year, and that's something they're really focusing on. So it's exactly what you're saying, Elias. But I'm just giving you props for that by just
and look, when you play
a
team that presses that high up the field, again, you can't afford to waste a pass. Exactly. So having your defenders able to spread the field out that much more because your goalie can break that press is so important.
That helps. We do have Eric Forget that says hi, so we'll say hi to you too. And we can just jump ahead on the midfield. And I want to hear you on the midfield. You did talk about it a bit earlier, Elias, saying that the midfield had a tough time against DC United. There was quite a few stuff, and we'll talk about the tactical side a bit more. We do have Wellington Sauvé that's always here from week in, week out, that says, and I want to hear you on that, Yves, Samuel Piette should be reminded that being the team captain is not a free pass to be on the starting 11. His performance is not up to the standard for a team captain. Let's face it. What do you think about that?
I agree that he had a really dismal performance last night. He could not cope with the high press. He was absolutely smothered, and I think he struggled to find an alternative solution when he was pressed, which was DC's bread and butter for him last night. And that being said, like it was a poor performance from Samuel Piette, 100%. However, I find it to be a little bit of a little strong of a take. It's absolutely no. I don't think any competitive player gets a free pass to be in a starting 11 in MLS. I certainly would hope not. That being said, I do think probably last night would have been a night where a guy like Victor Wanyama, who has that ability to shield the ball so impeccably, he would have done a lot better in the situation that DC put those players in.
Yeah, and
but I struggle. Yeah, I struggle to imagine like benching him over that particular performance. He wasn't the only one who had a night to forget.
Yeah, and Patrick agrees with you. He said, I would like to see Wanyama start. His ball protection and ability to get out of trouble could help. So he's agreeing with you 100%. Elias, I feel that, Wellington's comment is not completely wrong, as Yves said. But what to say about Mathieu Choignard's performance? Because it wasn't so much better than Samuel Piette's.
No, you're right. He was very invisible. It felt almost like because of how strong the press was, the midfield altogether was kind of bypassed. And you had the center backs looking for Yankov, Kokoro, Martinez, and then they would try and find the fullbacks, and then that's how they get forward.
Yeah.
And if that's what you're going to do, okay. But in return, you can't be leaving gaps in the midfield, because now you don't have to worry about, like, you're not involved in the build-up play. You're used almost as a decoy to kind of skip lines, to break out of the press. Why, at the same time, now that you're not worried about the bulk of the possession, are you also leaving gaps in the midfield? Because you can't have it. You can't be missing out on responsibilities on both sides of the ball. That's not it's not okay. So that was my bigger concern. I wasn't too upset that they weren't seeing much of the ball. I understand, especially on the road, that's going to be, a very, very common thread, but you have to be good for it defensively. And no, I agree with you, right? This was the game for Victor Wanyama. This was also the game for three midfielders and two forwards. This was the one, right? This was the perfect moment for Victor Wanyama, who is unfazed, and especially in the first half, when the press was so much more intense and so much more suffocating. You need that kind of cool, calm, and collected to not only calm down your midfield, but also your defenders, because that is an outlet, and they don't have to always break lines. So,
what's very interesting also, Elias, in the post-game presser, I asked a question to Samuel Piette regarding the midfield and saying, you guys were overrun in the midfield. Did you talk to your staff saying, guys, we need a bit more help, something needs to be done? And I love the answer of Samuel Piette. He said, yes, the 2 8s of DC United were man marking us, Mathieu and I. And we saw that very clearly. Mm-hmm. And that was Coup Di Pietro, and on the other side, Klisch. Exactly. I don't know how to pronounce it.
It's like Klisch, kind of.
Sorry about that. So those two were really man marking Mathieu Choignard and Samuel Piette. And what I liked is that Samuel Piette told me at halftime, I did talk to David Sobry, like the assistant coach, and I told him, listen, we need to find a way. And we realized that there was a bit of space next to the number 6, who was Peltola. Mm-hmm. And that's when they asked Dominic Yankov to stop being a left offensive midfielder, but to start playing a bit more down the middle next to Peltola in order to create that extra man in the midfield. And that's why, and he said, and we saw it, and we played a lot better in the second half, at the beginning of the second half. And then there was a comment from Samuel Piet saying, and then he was subbed off, talking about Dominic Yankov. So how interesting is it, Yves, that you see players talk to the coach and giving them their impression tactically, in a way? Is that something that you find interesting, or that something for you is a bit of, is he being not obedient to his coaching staff in a certain way?
No, I mean, the players are the ones out there living it. The coaching staff is watching from the sidelines, but at the end of the day, like Samuel Piet, like they're feeling those players' breath on their necks.
Yeah.
So I think it's completely normal if they're saying, like, look, we are having the hardest time getting the ball up the field. We are just absolutely smothered. Like we need some help. We need somebody else in the midfield to give us an extra outlet. Like I would hope players would speak up. Yeah, I would hope. Obviously, it all happens in a respectful manner and all that dialogue, all that good stuff. But I also think like that's the culture that Laurent Courtois wants to instill, is to allow players to be open with their feelings, when things are going well, when things are going not well, based on kind of what we've heard from him since his hiring. So no, I'm not remotely surprised.
Interesting. And Elias, I know you're coaching youth soccer from time to time. For
those
fun.
5-year-olds telling you what to do.
Hey, they're 18.
No, I know.
Come on.
I'm
no,
sorry.
but like sometimes I'm pretty sure you have some of your players saying, "Hey, you know what? I have trouble with that player," or you know what? I'm struggling to really turn and finding my teammates. Is that something that you take into consideration? Whatever one of your players talk to you.
Oh yeah, I mean, like at the end of the day, your tactics are good, but if they can't be executed on the field, then what really what good are they?
Of course.
So you have to, if it's clear that maybe if you ran the simulation with robots, this would work, but with humans, it's not working. Then you have to compromise, because you're not playing FIFA. You're entrusting your tactics to real humans who have nuance. So yeah, I think it's good that they noticed how that wasn't working, even if that was maybe the game plan that they were confident in, it wasn't working. I'm just a little disappointed they didn't make that adjustment, considering it wasn't a massive adjustment, because it was just mostly positioning of one player. They didn't make it sooner. Because it could not have been obvious to them only when Samuel Piet brought it up at halftime. They must have noticed very, very quickly. So I'm surprised it took them that long to maybe pull the trigger on something, because you're already getting killed in the midfield. So what's the worst that could happen? You get killed more? I mean, you're not really going to get killed more. If anything, Yankov is going to drop deeper, which means you have more possession. So I think that I would have liked to see them maybe recognize and execute something mid-game. But again, maybe you chalk this up to, this is still a coaching staff that's learning one another and gaining experience. But that is, I'm happy they found the right answer, because they started the second half much better, but it should not have taken 45 minutes for that to be implemented.
You know what? I can't wait anymore to talk about Laurent Courtois' staff and his decisions. We'll talk about the offense right after, but let's start with you, Elias, because you did talk quite a few times about the tactical formation. You talked about the fact that the midfield was overrun at the beginning. You're talking right now about how come the coaching staff didn't realize and tweak things, before the halftime. And let's face it, Laurent Courtois made some decisions, and his staff, of course, with the substitutions, with removing Matthias Kokaro and putting on Lassie Lapolainen, removing Samuel Piet, putting on Bryce Duke, Dominic Yankov to put Nathan Saliba, and then you have the George Campbell that came on for Gabriele Corbo, and then Sunusi that came on for Juan. What did you think about his performance, like the staff performance during that game, can we say that defeat is a bit on them? I'll start with Elias, and then I'll be back to you, Eve, because I can see you nod your head.
On them, no, because I think that, I don't think this was their best game by a long shot, but this really was a team effort, and I don't think assigning culpability to one facet of it is fair. Because, at the same time, the offense wasn't super clinical. The midfielders got lost in the chaos. The defenders conceded a fair amount of chances, even with the goal notwithstanding. The goal was a nice shot. You live and you die with that. That's whatever. But I think that, yes, the staff could have done more. Like I just said, I think that they were maybe a bit too timid. And I think that Laurent Courtois, especially with his personality, his beliefs, his philosophies, I think he shouldn't be scared of sticking his chest out and saying, this is what we do now. We take control of the game, and we're making this change right now. And especially if all you have to do is call over like one player during a set piece or like a dip in the tempo and just say, instead of being here, slot in next to the 6 and drop in and help Mathieu and Sam. And then he can communicate. I think that's what I want to see from someone like Laurent Courtois. And I hope that, again, I talked about this throughout, this beginning of the season. He's someone who so far has shown that he can learn from his mistakes. One of them is, don't be so timid. Don't wait to talk it over with the players and the staff. If you have a gut feeling, trust your gut and make the change, because it was clearly the right instinct to make that adjustment. Now do it.
Yeah, I agree. But also, putting, some players that lack completely match fitness into a game that's already very demanding physically, for me, that's raises a bit of questions in my opinion. And we have Wellington saying, Lassie wasted a golden opportunity to level the game. And he's completely right, because Lassie had it on a silver platter.
Yeah.
Had that equalizing goal on a silver platter. Eve, I want to hear you about the coaching staff and their decisions, putting Lassie, up front, not as a wing back, all those stuff. What did you think about that performance?
Yeah, see, I think, Elias, I don't want to throw you into the, I feel like you were like a little bit equivocating on this one, because you were like, yeah, they are to blame, but also no, I don't blame them. I think
completely.
Elias is always very nice.
I'm the diplomat. We know this.
I think like, yes, individual players did not have great days, but I think it's up to the coaching staff to recognize that players are not either in their best form, that the tactics have been set up that don't match with the players, like as far as the opposition goes. Offensively, like, it wasn't connecting. I forgot Joseph Martinez was out there in the first half period. So I think the fact that they didn't really react, or they didn't implement at least a definite tactical change until into the second half. I mean, they essentially wasted the first 45 minutes of the match by sitting back and waiting. That's half your match gone right there. So to me, they do own a lot of the blame in this defeat. Like, no, nothing's ever going to be 100% on someone's shoulders, except for like in the case of, wild catastrophes. But for me, yeah, they do take a pretty significant hit on this one. As well, some of the subs for me, they had me a little bit scratching my head, unless it's a question of player fitness, because we know that Bryce Duke is really, 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 really not confident right now. His entrance, unfortunately, was...
when talking about a dismal performance, for me, the player that really, for me, is like the definition of dismal was Bryce Duke. I'm being very harsh, but you know what? Yesterday, he was bad. Like, really, really, really bad. Because he's always been not so good on the pitch, but he had that vision. He had the technical ability to show some good stuff and to do some very good things. But yesterday, he didn't do anything. He lost most of the balls that he got, and he wasn't even there to recuperate to win the ball back. He wasn't even there. He didn't do anything. And again, Lassi Lapalainen, when you're coming in for Matthias Kokero, like, you have very big shoes to fill, and unfortunately, he didn't. Like, yes, he got that chance, but got that chance not because of his ability, but because of Joseph Martinez really fighting him and creating that chance for him. So I don't know. For me, there's a big responsibility on the coaching staff. A big responsibility on the. So I completely agree with you, Yves. And when I asked a question to Laurent Courtois also about asking him, what did you think about your midfield? Honestly, I saw that he mumbled at one point, but he said, the first thing he said, and I liked that, his answer, he was like, hats off to DC United that had a very, very good game and was able to exploit, our weaknesses. And then his excuse was that a lot of players are coming back from injury, and talking about George Campbell, talking about Lassi Lapalainen, talking about, and he talked about 4 or 5 players, that are coming right back from injury. And for me, I feel that Laurent Courtois and his staff learned from this a lot.
I hope so.
That's the thing that I really, have a tendency to remember, that, it's okay to lose a game. It's okay if it's your fault, but you know what? Do not do it again.
Yeah.
And we do have a comment that we received just before the game from G Money, and I want to hear you on that. He said, "Shades of previous regimes, nightmares." What do you guys think about that comment?
I
The
really
first
like
half,
that comment.
100%.
Yeah.
Go for it.
At
Sorry.
the same time, though, I think that, if you look at last year and the standard of play, we would have killed to have a game like this. Would have been one of the best away games of the year last year.
True.
And
Oh
like
my God,
this,
so bad.
which is kind of
That's
crazy.
how bad
But
we
like,
were last year. Not that's how good we were in that game.
This and the Chicago game, they would be throwing parties. They would be celebrating, right? Because already, first of all, on the road, completely different team. But yeah, that first half where they just seemed physically outmatched, they just seemed like they were almost hanging on for dear life to not concede a goal. And then last year, right, it was you hang on for dear life until you concede, and if you concede, well, game over. That's what the first half felt like, and we finally saw them fight back in the second. But the first half was really just depressing.
Yeah.
Because it felt like it didn't feel like a
falling
step
asleep.
back. It
was
didn't
falling
feel like a
asleep.
step back.
read
It
a
felt like
book.
almost like a mini. It almost felt like a mini relapse.
It was a really good book.
It felt like a mini relapse, which is weird considering how many players that weren't on the team last year were in this starting 11, right? Because you have, I'll say 4.5, because you had 4 players that were on the team last season, and you had Fernando Alvarez, who didn't spend much time, who didn't have that many minutes. So like
He didn't play any at all.
exactly. So you have
right?
you have 4, essentially 5 players who weren't really playing that much on the road last year, which means which is why it was so confusing that this looked so much like last year's team in the first half.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, Jim, he kind of hit the nail on the head there, that I saw a lot of tendencies and a lot of mannerisms that I hadn't seen this season, and hopefully that gets stamped out, because it's easy to get down on yourself and kind of spiral. So
Yeah. Now, let's talk about the offense, because we talked a bit about Laurent Courtois. Let's talk about the offense, and again, because it's kind of a transition to what we were saying, and the coaching staff decisions. Having those 3, Dominic Yankov, Matthias Kokero, and Joseph Martinez. What did you guys think about them? I'll let you start, Yves. Do you think it was a good game from them individually and collectively?
I think like we saw some of the limitations of Joseph Martinez because he is a striker, and so he's not going to be as participatory. And like really, the team needed kind of all hands on deck to help them get the ball where it needed to be. So I think we saw a little bit because he wound up a little bit on an island at times because he wanted to be at the head of the line, you know, for when chances did arise, and they were so few and far between. Like I could not. I had to look like at the lineup to determine who our other striker was partway through because I was like, who the heck is it? Because he just was so uninvolved in the first half at least. And of course, Montreal just hardly had the ball out of the defensive half in the first half, which makes sense then. He did play 90 minutes though, which I think, he did play, you know, so I think that bodes well from a stamina perspective in games that Montreal is going to get a little bit more joy in creating offensive opportunities. I did like the chance that he set up for Lassi Lapalainen. You know, that I think shows that acumen that he does have, and you know that instinct. You know, he has contributed some assists for Montreal already this season, so I am glad to see him participating in that regard. As for Kokoro, you know, it's hard. It's hard, like, to talk a lot about the players when for 45 minutes they didn't have the whole heck of a lot to do. I did think Yankov was significantly more effective when he was moved down to a 10 position in the second half, because then, of course, he was able to serve as an outlet for those two players. So I almost just want to look at their second half performance, honestly. I think that's almost all that's worth looking at. Kokoro, he was very, very quiet. I understand like he might not have been 100% going into this game. I read that he had missed a little bit of training this week. So perhaps he was carrying a little bit of a knock and he wasn't 100%, because I did feel he wasn't as explosive. He wasn't as all over the pitch like he had been in his previous displays. And so I'm wondering if perhaps he was just not feeling it, and he needed maybe not to start that match instead.
Interesting. Honestly, interesting. And I want to hear you, Elias, also on those three players. I have a lot of trouble going against or saying bad things about Matthias Kokoro. In my opinion, he cannot play as an offensive midfielder. He has to play as a striker.
I agree.
And we saw, because his performance for me was subpar because he wasn't playing in the right position for him.
Mm-hmm. Maybe
he's the one that should be up front, and maybe Joseph Martinez playing a bit behind. And even in the first half, I liked what I saw from Joseph Martinez. The few chances that he had, he made good use of them. He distributed the ball very well. He created the couple of chances that we had in the first half, because we did have 5 minutes where we had a couple of chances. They all came from Joseph Martinez. Mm-hmm. But the player that disappointed me the most was Dominik Yankov. So what do you think, Elias? Do you agree with me, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think my biggest, not surprise, but my biggest almost eyebrow raise was just how good under pressure Joseph Martinez was, especially with his back to a defender. Because he was really the one that was triggering the hold-up play, right? He would get the ball and he found Ruan or even Lassiter several times and quite effectively. So that was really nice to see, because, like you said, I think he would do better in a tandem behind Kokoro. Let Kokoro do the running, let him do the heavy lifting, and then have Martinez use his experience, his eye for goal, his knack for position, all the qualitative things that he does so well to get himself in the right spot. That almost led to a goal, right? It's not for an Aaron Herrera clearance off the line, right? That he does so well, and that got him the goal against Dallas, right? It was literally just instinct, like reacting and then making the run in behind. So, yeah, I think my biggest disappointment was Dominik Yankov, because in the first half he wasn't in the right spot, and in the second half, when he finally started to kind of get on the ball, I think you're starting to see just how technically excellent he is. My biggest concern is there is still a bit, and this may also be because he's coming back from injury, but there is a bit of a lack of athleticism on his behalf, or you see him and he may dribble one or two guys, but he's not taking off running by anybody, right? With the ball at his feet, I think he might be, him and Victor Wanyama are probably the two best technical players on the team, which will be really fun to see them on the field together. I think that'll be almost a nightmare to handle. But in a game like this on the road where you're doing a lot of running, that kind of almost exposed maybe a bit of a lack of pace. And I think that when you have two strikers in front of you and not, not as a winger, or not as a winger, but like a bit more of an outside player, that's on display a lot more than when you're playing as a 10. So I'd love to see him just play in his natural position, because you have so many players now that are suited for the way Laurent Courtois wants to play and could be playing in their natural position. So he just has to do it. It's that simple.
Yeah. Is there anybody, Eve, that came on as a sub that really interested you, or that you want to talk about, that you thought that was good and helped, or was bad and didn't help?
Well, I think we talked about the two players who entered and did not have a good cameo. So I think we exhausted that topic already. But as for the other players who subbed in, for Sanusi, Ibrahim, and George Campbell, it was so short that there's not enough. I know there was one clearance that George Campbell made that I really liked, but that was like, I think the one moment we saw him, so I was like, okay. So as for Nathan Saliba, kind of the only other player who played enough minutes, I did like his work rate when he came in. He bailed out Ariel Lassiter a little bit, he bailed out Ariel Lassiter. I know in one moment, I recall that specifically, or at least he bailed out the left side. I shouldn't necessarily single him out. It might have been Alvarez as well. And I did like his work rate when he came in. He didn't necessarily contribute a whole ton to the team going forward, but at the same time, I think it was a little bit better than what we were getting out of the midfield and out of, I guess, Sam Piet, who he would kind of be the closest to subbing in for, even if it was Duke who had truly subbed in for him.
Interesting. Okay. Anything else that you want to add, Elias, or we do have a few questions and we'll go to that.
I just really liked Nathan Saliba's little cameo again. My hot take at the beginning of the year was that he will make himself indispensable, and I think he's well on his way to doing that, because again, he didn't have much time, but he definitely did his job very, very effectively.
But you know what? I agree with you. But from what I've seen from the beginning of the season from Mathieu Chouanière and Samuel Piet, for me, both of them deserve to be on the pitch still. So
I agree, but I said by the end of the season he will be indispensable, and I stand by that, because the couple cameos he's had, he's been rock solid. So
let's move on with the questions. So we do have a few comments more than questions from Tate. Team looked very tired in the first half, and I want to add a couple more comments also that in my opinion are go the same way as Tate's comment. So the first one is Joe that says Joe Del Balso that says very slow on the ball all night, too much hesitating on passes and shots, also pretty much lost all battles for the ball. And last but not least, from Robbie, you will probably discuss it as part of the match review, but why do you think we looked so overmatched last night? Oh, and happy Easter to all of you. To you, Robbie. So, guys, I think those three comments go hand in hand.
Very much, yeah.
Honestly, Eve, I want to hear you first. I'm pretty sure I know your answer. So what do you think about those comments?
So I kind of think like bits and pieces of our discussion. I think Robbie kind of knew we already nailed it. But for me, like, yes, definitely Montreal looked outmatched, and I think that they had been outcoached going into this one. So for me, I am going to rest, I think, my focus on the coaching, because not only was DC's plan absolutely perfect to just kill any joy Montreal was going to try and have going forward, but Montreal also didn't act quickly enough from the coaching perspective to compensate for DC's absolutely stifling press. So
You
that
know what? I have nothing more to add on my part. Completely agree with what Eve said.
thank
So
you.
Elias, diplomatic Elias, go ahead. So we have pessimistic Eve, diplomatic Elias. So
And also
Wait,
pessimistic
what?
Hattie.
Yeah,
On
what's
this,
I
on
like
this, on
pessimistic.
this tape.
No, I'm
what's your
always on the
adjective?
fence. I'm always on. It's your job to find me an adjective, not
We'll
mine.
find you an adjective. But no, I actually, I kind of agree with Eve.
He
A
didn't
little
want
bit,
to, but
just a little bit, begrudgingly.
Begrudgingly.
Yes, this game is a little more pessimistic than diplomatic. I'm still gonna stick to my gimmick because it's fun. But yeah, I think overall, this is one of the. I hate playing against DC United.
yeah, it's always tough.
It's
It's always tough.
just
And
one
you
of
know
those
what?
teams that it's never fun. It's Montreal never
No.
enjoys playing against them,
No.
and there's a reason they call it un beau gros zéro zéro bien plat DC United. There's a reason that's kind of the parlance, and this wasn't a 0-0, but it felt like it.
Yeah, felt like
Although
it.
I do think DC will be more attractive to watch than under Wayne Rooney.
Yeah,
Yes,
completely
that is
agree.
also true. But I mean,
I like the way of playing.
Yeah,
It
actually.
reminds me.
it's much
it
more
reminds me.
progressive when they
Yeah,
weren't
it-
just spamming crosses to Christian Benteke.
Yeah.
and it shows that their coach was with the Red Bulls, because it reminds me a
Mhm.
lot of how the Red Bulls used to play with Jesse Marsch. It's the
Very
same
much.
kind of game, and I really like it. So very interesting. We do have one final question, and I'm gonna start with you, Elias, and then we'll move to Eve right after.
Yeah.
And I find it very interesting from Emil. Earlier, you said you'd be happy with 6 points in 6 games, Hady, and points in 3 games, Elias. CF Montreal has achieved that. If the team ends the series on 3 unsatisfactory games, does that change your assessment, or is it still a successful season start? Eve, I don't remember where specifically you came down on that debate. Sorry. So before
okay.
let's
It was meaner.
let's ask Elias, what do you think about the question of Emil's question, and then of course Eve, I have a follow-up question, and if you remember your take on that debate, I'm if you can reshare it with us, that would be very nice. So go ahead, Elias.
So far, yes, absolutely, it's a success. Absolutely. The game against Chicago was an act of God, literally. The game against DC, it's the road games against MLS. It happens. The thing now is Seattle is last place in the Western Conference. And yes, traveling to Seattle, traveling across, to another coast sucks, and nobody enjoys it, and very few teams have success doing it. But Seattle is last place. So this unless they lose like 3-0 or whatever, like they do sometimes when they travel west, this is going to be a successful road trip. I want to see something different, right? Because we know that Seattle also loves to pack the midfield. So we see a midfield. Will we see a different midfield? I just want to see, again, evolution. I want to see progression. I want to see continuous learning, not just from Courtois, but from the group. That being said, and again, unless you get played off the pitch by the worst team in the Western Conference, this has been a successful road trip.
Eve, do you remember your take on that debate?
I think I said 4 points across the 6 matches.
So,
I was carrying my 2023 season hangover, okay?
True to form.
So, and you said, I'm pretty sure I remember it, but I wanted to see if you remembered. So you said 4 points would be like amazing, and you'd be very happy, and that would be like a big exploit and everything. So what do you feel right now when you see that CF Montreal has already 7 points?
So definitely, obviously, way better than I expected, way better than any of us expected. That being said, though, to kind of, I guess, circle back a little bit to Emil's question, if, and a little bit as well, Elias's answer, you want to see the team get better as preseason, or not preseason. It's almost like preseason because they're away. As the season goes on, even though they are on the road, and so they're, having to kind of concede a little bit to the hosts as far as playing style and so on and so forth, because not every coach can go in it and dominate at opposing stadiums. But you want to see them get better. And so, we definitely saw progress in those first 3 matches. Then we saw some really, a combination of really bad officiating and some individual brain farts that led to the loss against Chicago. Then we saw some lackluster individual performances, and we saw kind of a step back, I feel, in the coaching aspect of it. So for me, this last match is going to be really pivotal to determine whether or not we enter the home phase of the season with a good vibe or not. Because if you lose 3 in a row, it is hard to be unless there's all kinds of controversy and so on, and VAR just comes in and issues 20 red cards and penalties and stuff. It's going to be hard to say losing 3 matches in a row in different ways is a great look, but you could probably still make a case for some progress being made and some evolution. But obviously you would want your team entering their first home match of the season in full confidence, in form, on the back of a win, and all that good stuff. So I'm really on the fence about this one, because I feel like the Seattle game is almost like a trap game, because it's their last one. Like Elias said, they're last in the conference, and you're going to have to hope that the players don't have their eyes on that first home match, and that they're super dialed in for this one. So I think this one's going to be massive for the coaching staff.
You see, in my opinion, and I'm going Elias' side on that front, and
I won one. Let's go.
For me, the Seattle game is completely irrelevant. Irrelevant, and for me, it's.
I know Western Conference,
yeah, because it's in the Western Conference, because of we know you play on turf in Seattle. You're playing against a team that's wounded in a certain way, and in all aspects wounded. You can take the word in all aspects. So I feel that CF Montreal has done what they needed to do at the beginning of the season. 7 points is massive, and at the end of the day, it's the points that count. Nothing else counts. So 7 points from 6 road games for me is a very good total. Now, if they're able to get more points in Seattle, that would be even better for sure, 100%. But for me, they job well done for the first 6 games of the season. For me, the 13th of April is a completely new season. This is not the same season that we started in February. It's a new season, because at that point, you're going to be able to mix between a home game and an away game, which is a normal season for any football club in the world. So you have this difficult stretch in the beginning of the season where you were able to get those points. Good, amazing. What's interesting right now is that you positioned yourself very well to start the second part of the season that starts on the 13th of April. So that's my opinion. So the match in Seattle, even if I do agree with Eve that, momentum is interesting and is important, but, it's so early in the season that momentum doesn't have the same impact that it would have in 2 months, right? So that's why for me, momentum right now is not that important as it would be in 2 months.
Okay.
I'll meet you in the middle
on that one.
It's my opinion. Now, I do have one last question on that, because I love what Emil asked as a question. I don't know if you guys remembered when we talked about that 6-game stretch. We talked about 2 games as being the 2 games where we need to get points. And it was Chicago and DC. And it's the only 2 games that we lost.
It's ironic, huh?
It's really ironic, but I really love it, because at the end of the day, the points are the only thing that matters, and we do have the points. Interesting. So I don't know if you guys have anything else to add on CF Montreal if we move to the next topic.
Ready?
Let's do this. Next topic, guys. Beth Priestman announced her starting 11, her final roster for the SheBelieves Cup. As you guys know, we talked about it quite a few times already. It's only going to be 1 game first, and then you move on to the it's a semi-final, then you move on to the final or to the third place. This is the roster that she chose. Sorry, Eve. This is the roster that she chose. So she chose Simi Awujo, Janine Becky, that's back, Khadisha Buchanan, Gabrielle Carl, Sabrina D'Angelo, Jessie Fleming, Vanessa Gilles, Julia Grosso, Jordan Heidema, Chloe Lacasse, Clarissa Larisi, Ashley Lawrence, Adriana Leon, Lisiane Prou, Quinn, Deanne Rose, Jade Rose, Desiree Scott, that's back also, Kaylin Sheridan, Olivia Smith, Bianca Saint-Georges, Evelyn Vian, Shelina Zadorsky. Eve, when you see that final roster, what is your reaction? Knowing, I'm pretty sure you're going to talk about Marie-Yasmin Adidou that missed the squad, but anything else than that, you can talk about Adidou for sure, but anything else.
Obviously, having Janine Becky back, for me, that was like the first name I saw on that list. That's massive for this team. You know, she's such an important player, not only on the pitch, but off the pitch for this squad. To have her available for selection is great. She's already been playing. She's already scored some goals for the Thorns, you know, early in their NWSL season. So really, 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 really massive boost to have her back. Also, from a leadership perspective, Desiree Scott is a massive leader for this team as well. And as they're rolling into this transition in the post-Christine Sinclair era, I expect that her role is definitely going to be more limited than it was prior to her injury. However, I do think that she is going to be able to help mentor some of those younger players in the midfield, like a Simi Awujo, for example. It is really disappointing to see Marie-Yasmin Adidou not selected. However, I do struggle to like say who I would replace with her in this lineup or this selection, honestly. Especially knowing that kind of a Priestman isn't 100% sure of where is the best spot for her to play. So I do feel really bad because I don't think she's doing anything wrong with Benfica, not at all whatsoever. It's just a matter of, it's unfortunately a super competitive selection right now.
Yeah, and exactly. And in the offensive sector, there's so many great players there that are very informal and performing. So that's very tough, I think, on Beth Friesman. You know, one of these players was going to be left out, and she chose Marie-Yasmin Adidou just because she's not already in the team. She hasn't found and stabilized herself in the team in a certain way. Elias.
I mean, not just that, right? Remember, she's like a 10/second striker. That's where she plays best. And if Bev Priestman is sticking with a 3-4-3, she's kind of just not really sure about where she fits in that system. So I kind of understand why she may be on the outside looking in.
Yeah.
She's probably really fun off the bench, but again, you have so much firepower that, you know, it's tough to have someone like that come off the bench when you have Evelyn Vian come off the bench, for example.
No, exactly. And we have also Nichelle Prince that missed out the squad. I'm pretty sure she's still injured, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
But still, I think that's also a big loss for the Canadian women's national team. But I think it's going to be very interesting to see how Janine Becky fit in the starting 11. If she plays as a right wing back, she's going to replace Ashley Lawrence. What does it say? Does it say that Ashley Lawrence will play in the middle, or should she play as a left wing back, which is, I don't think, the best opposition for her? Or if she plays in that front three, so that means that one of these players is going to lose their place. So is it going to be Chloe Lacasse? Is it going to be Adriana Leon? Or is it going to be Jordan Heidema? So many questions.
I know.
But I think interesting questions.
Very.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that Chloe Lacasse is very good with both feet, right? That's like one of the things that she's best known for. So I think moving her to the right side. She
has to be in 11. She has to be in the starting 11.
Absolutely. That's why I think like moving her to the right and having, you know, Janine Becky play on the left wouldn't her, again, depending on, you know, how you want your wingers to operate. I think that Chloe Lacasse is, you know, her being so ambidextrous means that you could kind of really put her wherever Janine Becky maybe wouldn't be as great. So I think
she's
that,
better on the right.
Yeah.
Becky, she's better on the right. So you would
yes,
have
but
to
she
know
also
that that's
does
from the
like,
left.
she does also like playing on the left. She has played on the left before.
Yeah,
So
true.
I mean, I don't really know where she's played with Portland this year. I haven't had the chance to catch
On
a
the
game.
right, and most of the time as wing back.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I think she'll play further forward. I just think that
Me
Ashley
too.
Lawrence right now is just too strong to not kind of keep her spot, and she's been so good with Canada too.
Yeah.
But I think that, these are all good problems to have. Right? This is the thing again. This is all like, these are all good issues. It's almost like an abundance, which is kind of nice.
Yeah. So Eve, what to expect from the SheBelieves Cup? Is that right now Beth Priestman has to establish her starting 11 and play that as being a part of the Olympics,
Mm-hmm.
or does she have the opportunity to also try some new stuff, in your opinion?
I think with the returns from injury of players who we know historically have been incredibly significant, I think there is going to be a degree of experimentation. There's only 2 matches being played at the SheBelieves Cup for Canada, so like there's a finite amount of wiggle room for Bev Priestman here to play around and try different things. But I definitely think we are going to see different lineups than what we saw at the W Gold Cup, because I can't imagine a planet on which she does not want to work Janine Becky into her starting 11 somehow. And so I do expect we're going to see a degree of experimentation. That being said, I don't think we're going to see like 10 different players who we aren't going to see starting that first Olympic match. You know what I mean? So I'm going to I'll lean a little bit more, I guess, towards the creative side. I think she's going to try to kind of reharmonize her team, maybe, with those significant players in that first match. And then maybe the second match will kind of determine if she sticks with that, or if it didn't really pass the eye test in the first match, then perhaps she kind of goes back to the drawing board. I would hope, though, that the second match would look probably closer to the lineup that we can expect to see at the kickoff for the Olympics.
Interesting. Elias, any other thing that you want to talk about the Canadian women's national team and the SheBelieves Cup?
No, I just want it to be the Olympics already. I'm very excited.
Yeah.
It's very soon, just in 3 months. So
yeah.
we're almost there. Moving on, next topic is going to be Kevin Blue, the General Secretary of Canada Soccer, the new General Secretary of Canada Soccer, issued a statement that was very, very, very interesting. In my opinion, I found it very interesting to show some transparency on the financial state of the federation. And I want to talk about just a few topics. We're not going to go and read it all together, but just a few topics that for me are very interesting. Let's start with the first one. He says Canada Soccer budget for the 2024 year the 2023 shows a $4 million operating deficit on total expenses of 30 millions. So the budget was 26 millions and the expenses were 30 million. So that gives a deficit of 4 millions. And what I liked is the comparison that he gave right after, saying, for context, the U.S. Soccer Federation reported a 40 million deficit on 188 million of total expenses for 2023. And they're forecasting a 3 million surplus on 184 million of total expenses in 2024. Which is, I think, very, very interesting. And then he gave, because we always tend to compare ourselves to the U.S., but I like the fact that he gave a few more information on another nation, which is Australia, saying Australia reported a 669,000 surplus on 112 million in expenses in Australian dollars, which is similar to the Canadian dollar, by the way, for 2023. How bad is it for Canada to be so far off, knowing that the budget was only 26 million when the US had 188 and Australia had 112 million as a budget? Like, does that concern? Like, are you concerned? Like, Eve, are you worried?
So I lack a little bit of context because obviously Australia, like, don't get me, like, US is a whole different country, whole different infrastructure. So I've wholly expected them to have a significantly different budget than Canada, sadly. I would just wonder, I guess, for Australia, like, is that their normal budget, or was that slightly different because last year, of course, they hosted the Women's World Cup? So I would be a little bit curious. Like, I lack a little bit of context in that regard. But yeah, like, when you just look at those numbers as they were presented in that statement, it's pretty paltry. It feels like peanuts. It's sad. It's pretty dismal, I gotta say. And obviously organizations can operate in a deficit for a short period of time. Like, that's not super abnormal. Even what he highlighted was, the US had a deficit last year, but then of course they're forecasting to kind of right the ship. So it's not like, push the panic button because there was a deficit. But nonetheless, like, yeah, it's a significant deficit when you look at just sort of the little amount that they had to spend.
I know, exactly. And I like the thinking ahead of Kevin Blue, Elias. He said, thinking ahead, my initial assessment is that Canada Soccer must grow annual revenues by between 10 million and 12 million to robustly fund its programs and serve its stakeholders from grassroots up to the national teams, which I really love the fact that he mentioned grassroots and the national teams and not only one national team, which unfortunately the previous regimes were only focused on. He talked about two concepts. The first one is based on the consumer price index. Canada Soccer has foregone 5.84 million in revenue since 2017 because the player levy has not been adjusted for the consumer price index. We are discussing a true-up of the player levy for CPI, along with a proportional adjustment of membership affiliation fees. What do you think about that, Elias? Like, for grassroots, most of all, this could have a very big impact on some of the teams, for some of the clubs that will have to pay, higher memberships than they used to pay before, like since 2017. What do you think about that? What kind of impacts this could have on grassroots soccer?
Soccer in Canada is already absurdly expensive. For what is required to play the game, it is. And like, this is the thing: people in Quebec have got it good. People don't understand how much government subsidies take off the cost of, like, people paying for soccer. I went to Toronto 2 years ago for a tournament and I kind of spoke to the coaches there, and they pay what most people at, let's just say, a regional level, not elite, not house league, just to play against people in your region. What most Quebec people pay in a year is what they pay just for the winter, just for their off-season training. It is incredibly expensive all over the country to pay for soccer, and this isn't just AAA or semi-pro or even on the route to that. This is just conventional
Recreational.
soccer. Exactly. This is recreational. This is developmental. This is grassroots. This is what we're talking about. So I think the biggest thing is the fact that the brunt is going to fall on individuals.
Of course.
And that is what I'm worried about, because again, right now we're headed towards a massive recession, and people just may not have money for soccer if the prices keep going up, and the cost of not just equipment but signing up with a club is going to run you thousands of dollars a year. That's just not something that regular middle class people have at their disposal. And you've just gotten to a place now where soccer is on the up. In this last decade, we've seen more growth in soccer than we've seen in 30 years prior. So this, I understand the need for revenue, but at the same time, this cannot be the way you go about it, because you're essentially you're compromising your future to survive now. And
Yeah, but
what good is surviving now if you are actively discouraging a significant portion of your population from signing up for organized soccer?
I understand, but the clubs can be a bit creative also, by granting some uh, how do we say it, some discounts to the best players that at the tryout, even if saying, what, we have the 20 best players will have a 50% discount on the membership fees. They'll be selected by our jury or whatever it is. You have ways of being creative to give a chance to the really good players to pay a bit less. Now, in a way, yes, I agree with you that it's tough on the individuals that will have to pay on that for that. But at the same time, the inflation has been so high that it's not normal that you're paying the exact price since 2017. It's just not normal. And then at that point, if you see, you see whole life in Canada is a lot more expensive. So at one point, soccer needs to follow. So unfortunately, it is that, but I completely agree with you, Elias. But I want to talk about something else, because regarding that, and that for you, Eve. He said, "I wish to emphasize that proposed adjustments to member fees are only a small part of the overall revenue growth solution. The majority of Canada Soccer effort to increase revenue will involve incremental commercial and philanthropic activity." So does that ease you in a way? Does that satisfy you, the fact that he's saying, yes, we're going to increase the member fees, but in a way, we're not going to put everything on the individuals?
It would be absurd to put everything on the individuals. Like, for me, that almost doesn't need to be said. It does need to be said, obviously, because if you say we're increasing fees, then you have to. But it would be mind-boggling to rely solely on membership fee increases, and I am Team Elias on this one as well. Wholly, by the way. But I would 100% expect that they would also be looking to generate revenue. Obviously with the whole CSB thing, like, I know sponsorships are complicated and so on and so forth. And as for philanthropy, like, I'm not sure who wants to donate money to Canada Soccer right now, like, the state that it's in. But good luck, I guess, is what I'll say on that one. But certainly you would hope that they would be looking for other avenues to minimize the impact on, the youth and the amateur who just want to go out and play to have fun. Because you don't want to exclude anyone. Soccer is for all is the statement that goes around, and it's used in many contexts, of course, but you do want it to be for everybody of all economic means. So I would hope that they would look very, very, very heavily at those alternative options.
I completely agree with you. And I like the second concept, and I'm pretty sure, Eve, you're going to love it. The second concept is an incremental investment that would direct additional funding specifically towards the launch of Project 8 and in support of our youth national teams. These are timely and strategically important investments. Project 8 ensures an equitable competitive pathway into professional football, and additional support for our youth national teams is important in light of FIFA's recently announced expansions of international youth competitions. We did talk a lot, Eve, about the importance of having a women's professional league. We are going to have one starting 2025, so next year with Project 8. Can't wait for the announcements, by the way. and having the backing of the new general secretary of Canada Soccer, for me, is a big win for women's soccer, women's professional soccer. And at the same time, you know, putting more money into youth programs, I think, is the way to go if you want to grow as a nation. So in a way, yes, members are going to pay more, but at the same time, professionalism is going to become the focus of Canada Soccer, which is in a way the role of the federation, right?
Yeah, 100%. You know, I think we obviously Project 8, we are 100% on board with that. But I think, you know, we've talked about it numerous times here. Other nations are catching up with our women's national team. Project 8 is definitely going to help women's players develop and, like he said in his statement, you know, enter the professional playing world with better stability, better visibility at home, and so on and so forth, provide more opportunities. But as well, we've also talked a lot about how the youth national teams have been handled, and how, you know, both in the men's and the women's programs, you know, how they really seem to not be taken quite as seriously with Canada Soccer.
Exactly.
And that is to the detriment of the senior teams, you know, a knock-on effect, if you will. So yeah, I'm almost like, yes, this should have happened ages ago.
But you know what? At least it's happening now, right?
Yes, exactly. Better late than never, right?
Exactly. Better late than never. And you know what, Elias, you know, the national teams, they feed off those youth teams in a way, right? So having them get that professionalism earlier in their career nationally, in their national team career, that for me is the next step into evolution as a soccer country. Do you agree with that?
Look, it is your lifeblood, you know, getting youth in soccer, because at the end of the day, you can't build a national team off of people that start playing soccer when they're 16 or 17 or whatever, because they've realized that they like soccer. You're so far behind then that you can't build a credible national program. You have to get a national philosophy and start, you know, having coaches and clubs and then kids understanding what it's like to play at the national level when they, if and when they're good enough. So yeah, 100%, you know, that is the first priority is making sure that your youth system is organized.
I know exactly. And then he finishes his statement by saying, in the coming weeks, I will also be engaging other stakeholders, including the Canadian soccer business and national team players, in the development of a forward-looking plan to strengthen the broader commercial and philanthropic foundation of our sport. Alignment of key stakeholders on several fronts is necessary to build higher levels of confidence with commercial and philanthropic partners so we can generate more value for all. This is an urgent task on which we must all work together towards a future where domestic football in Canada is properly supported on a solid and sustainable financial basis. I love that final paragraph. And in my opinion, that final paragraph puts the pressure on those stakeholders, on the Canadian soccer business. And you know what? That's what we expect from our general secretary, saying, you know what? This is my plan. This is what I'm going to propose. We need to work together. And you know what? The ball is in your corner in a certain way. And he diverts all the attention to them, which is exactly what he needed to do. For me, it's a 10 and 10 statement from Kevin Blue. I love it.
I think it's all about the action now.
Exactly.
Of course. But like as a strategy, I love it. Mm-hmm. His strategy is pretty good.
Strategy is great and all, but it's like a toxic relationship we've been hurt too many times.
But have you seen a good strategy like that in the past? I haven't.
Haven't seen much of a strategy, so
exactly. So
but we did see some spicy press conferences.
Or the Canadian heritage questions also that
yes.
That were very spicy. Moving on. Love that. I don't know if you have anything to add on this topic, or do we move on to social
I'm
media?
ready.
For the Twitter.
Let's do this. Go
Yeah.
on with social media.
All right. Yes, this is the first one from Dido. Canada right now, 1% chance, 99% faith. This is in response to a tweet from Score90 saying the favorites, best on 365. Canada has a 1% probability of winning Copa America. Too high, too low. That's right.
Right
What
on
do you
point.
think? Right on point. How do you think it's a bit harsh? Do you think they could do something stupid and surprise somebody?
No, I don't think so. I agree with Eve. Right on point. I just there are some other odds that I find very odd because putting
We
Mexico
could
at
pull. You
eight.
could pull the tweet back up so we
Yeah,
could
like
see
putting
where they're
Mexico
ranked.
at 8% for me is like nonsense.
Generous.
It's
It's
rather
generous.
high, yeah.
Like
And the
really
US at 6.
nonsense.
I mean, it also has to do with your group. I get it, but the US is in a
Yeah.
pretty favorable group.
Yeah.
So
For me, the
let's-
U.S. should be in front of Uruguay. They should be number 3 in my opinion. So,
Ooh.
oh yeah, as simple
Really?
as that. Oh yeah,
I don't know
Oh,
about that.
yeah.
Matias Kokoro, Freddy Valverde. I don't know.
yeah. Matias Kokaro in
Who's
the
going to be
Uruguayan
called up
shirt.
for the
I don't know, man. We'll see.
Okay.
Hopefully.
or hopefully not.
But
There's too many.
hopefully,
There's too many more
or
track
not.
players.
So
Hold on.
let's wait and see. But I don't know. I find
Yes,
those odds
yeah.
very
Eight
very
is
odd.
very generous.
Yeah.
6 is a bit harsh on the US. But
Yeah.
notice that all 3 members of Canada's group are ahead of them in this probability, which is also
Exactly.
something noteworthy.
Mhm.
Exactly. Let's wait and see.
Yep. All right, next up.
Next tweet. Yes, this is from Alexandre Gangiruzik, who we know and love. I've made it to BC Place for a big one tonight. Vancouver hosting the Portland Timbers in the Cascadia Cup clash. We love great rivalry names. Strong crowd is out here for this one, including a good PDX contingent, Portland contingent. Meanwhile, on the pitch, 3 Canadians are here for the Timbers, Miller, McGraw, and Capo, and 1 for the Caps in Ali Ahmed. What do you guys make of the fact that there's 3 times as many Canadians in a starting lineup for an American team than there is for a Canadian team, given that there's only 3 Canadian MLS teams? Do you think anything of it, or this was very upsetting for me almost? What's your takeaway?
No, I'm not gonna. I'll take off my pessimistic hat. I think it means that we have quality Canadian players who are, and I mean, oftentimes Canadian players even occupy an international spot with American MLS teams. So I think for American MLS teams to have that level of interest in our Canadian players, for me, I am here for it. I think it is a little bit of an uncharacteristic lineup. You do typically see a lot more Canadian content in Vancouver's lineups than what was present in that match. Not sure what's going on there. I haven't been following their season super duper closely. But I think it's a ringing endorsement of the quality of the Canadian players that, yeah, I'm here for that.
Yeah, exactly. And they're able to perform elsewhere than in Canada, which, for me, as I agree with Eve, it's a good thing. It's a good thing. I love just, completely off topic, but I love, did you guys see what Vanni Sartini, the coach of Vancouver, said in the post game? I love that tweet. And he said, on the Whitecaps' strong first half, he said, if the first half was a city, it was Florence. If it was a person, it was my wife. If it was an idea, it was socialism.
Oh,
I love it. Honestly,
He's so funny.
I love it.
I love it.
I love it. Sorry, I saw that and it was amazing. So the Whitecaps won 3-2 against Portland, but unfortunately a very bad game for Maxime Crépeau, by the way. But yeah, very, very interesting comments from Vanni Sartini after the game. So.
Yeah, he's been known for some interesting ones.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. Next up.
Yes, this is from W Soccer. The most liked woman in soccer. This is in response to a tweet from Casey Curran saying everyone deserves a teammate like Desiree Scott, who got her first solitary minute since coming back from knee surgery. And obviously we talked about her being in the SheBelieves Cup
Mhm.
lineup. Do you again, coming back from injury like that and a long time from injury and at her age, do you expect any significant game time, or is she really just there as, you know, a wise, experienced veteran to kind of help the younger players?
For me, the young players who have come in, like for me, Sumia Wujo is a revelation and needs to play. I think Quinn can absolutely hold it down. I think there are matches for the Destroyer. I do think she has her role to play. Like I think, for example, against the US, you know, she would be able to lock it down, keep that level head. She's been there, seen it all. I think there are roles that she can play, but at least in the first match versus Brazil, I really don't expect to see her. Maybe sub on.
I think that Desiree Scott has a place in a 23 player squad, but she doesn't in an 18 player squad. And for me, you know, you're preparing for the Olympics. If you're using Desiree Scott in those 23, that means that you know exactly who are the midfielders that you're taking in your 18, and you had no other options elsewhere that could be in competition with those 18. So I don't know. For me, she's so amazing, and as you know, as the tweet says, everybody likes her. She's really nice, but uh, unfortunately, she's not going to be in the Olympics, in my opinion. Or
Do you
she'll
think
be there.
do you think it's a chance for her to maybe, you know, have one last go with the national team camp to kind of prepare some of the younger players for the Olympics? Is
I
that why
don't
maybe
think
she's
so.
there?
Maybe she'll be with the team, you know, in the delegation with the team, but not as part of the 18. I'd be very surprised. You have so many young talents there. Simia Wujo, you have Quinn, you have Julia Grosso, you have Jessie Fleming, you have like that's already 4 players that can play in that position that for me are better than her. Um, I understand that you need that experience in the dressing room, but again, at that point, you also need the best quality. So that's my opinion.
Julia Grosso, who by the way is linked with a move to Real Madrid.
Yeah.
My advice is stay away, obviously. But better chance of
Obviously.
winning
Obviously.
the league with Bay, obviously. But yeah, that's all I have to say.
Wonderful. All right.
Totally unbiased and impartial advice to Julia Grosso.
Yeah. Okay, next up.
Yes, next up. Yes, this is from Benedict Rhodes. Luca Gavran might just be playing himself into a Canadian men's national team call-up. Luca Gavran, who has replaced the injured Sean Johnson the last 4 games for Toronto. Besides this game against Sporting KC, where they scored 3, he's conceded just 1 goal in 3 games. He has been lights out for Toronto. Is he on track to have a Jonathan Sirois type season where he kind of becomes a revelation and forces his way into this discussion? Or is he really just, you know, you're here until Sean Johnson gets back and then
he's here until Sean Johnson's come back.
Yeah, for the amount of money that Sean Johnson makes, I fully expect him to be the starting keeper.
And the difference between the two situations is that with CF Montreal, you have James Bentemis, who wasn't, you know, already a proven number 1 when Jonathan Sirois came in. So that's one thing. Sean Johnson is not only a proven number 1, but one of the best in MLS. So it's a completely different situation. But, you know, maybe, you know, at the end of the year, at one point, they would maybe trade Sean Johnson and then, you know, give a place for him as a number 1. Yes, that's possible. But right now, if Sean Johnson is back, he's the number 1, 100%.
Well, hopefully Luca Gavran can find maybe another net to mind elsewhere in MLS, because he has been really good for Toronto.
Yeah.
And definitely deserves to kind of keep on growing. We have one final tweet. Yes, this is from Michel Groux. It is the Pops board. So something fun here. We figured we could start doing the Pops board as a group and kind of contribute in our own special little way. If you guys want to put your predictions in the chat, you can. But predictions for Montreal against Seattle. Eve, go.
I'll say a 1-1 draw.
1-1 draw. Hady, what say you?
She stole my thunder. I
Oh.
would say
I don't have a trademark on 1-1.
I would say a 2-1 loss.
Ooh, really? I am going with a 3-1 win for
Okay.
Montreal. I think they're gonna get their legs back, and Seattle is just not having a good time. So that is that. So
Cool.
yeah, that's it for social media.
Are you gonna be the one that do we each have to go on the tweet to put it under?
No, we'll put a little video clip and we'll reply it as a group.
Okay, so you're making the video clip, right?
I'll make the video clip. Yeah.
Good. Perfect, guys. I love the social media, Elias. Thanks a lot for choosing those tweets. Always very, very interesting. Guys, that's going to be it for tonight for our show on The Ball is Round. Plenty to discuss as usual. Hope you guys liked our show. If you did, don't forget to share, retweet, share on Facebook, retweet, talk about us. And in case you want to do a bit more and you want to help us grow the product, we do have a Patreon page. Feel free to go and contribute there. Our product is always going to be free, but you can help us grow that product by becoming one of our Patreons. That's it for tonight. See you next week for episode 174 of The Ball is Round.